Welcome back to the Movie Man. Today I will show you a 2006 heist crime thriller drama film, Inside Man. Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. In the beginning of the movie, a man identifying himself as Dalton Russell is stuck in a tiny cell. He proclaims that he has recently executed the perfect bank robbery. In the following scene we see how the robbery was completed. In New York, robbers dressed in painter coveralls arrive in a van outside a branch of the Manhattan Trust Bank. They begin to unload what appears to be painting supplies onto hand carts. Dalton, who's one of the painters, walks into the bank and places two large high-intensity flashlights on one of the small service tables in the center of the bank's lobby. He turns them on and points them at two of the bank's security cameras, blinding them. Dalton then walks up behind a security guard and points a gun at his side. The other painters rush in brandishing firearms and dropping smoke bombs and subdue the bank customers. Meanwhile, a passing night patrol officer, Sergeant Collins, sees smoke coming out from under the bank doors. When he attempts to open the doors, he finds they are locked and calls police dispatch. At the police station, Detective Second Grade Keith Frazier is on the phone with his girlfriend Sylvia, who works as a desk officer at another station. They are discussing a corruption investigation that involves the crooked drug dealer who set Frazier up to appear as if he embezzled a large sum of drug deal money. The charge is holding him back from being considered for promotion to detective first grade. Next, Frazier and his partner Bill Mitchell are informed by their commanding officer, Captain Matthias Colon, that he's assigned them to work the hostage situation happening at the Manhattan Trust Bank. Jumping at the offer, they hurry to get to the bank. While this is happening, the police arrive in full force at the Manhattan Trust, including patrol officers, a mobile command center, and the emergency services unit. Word of the bank robbery is also sent to the bank's founder and chairman, Arthur Case. In the following scene, Frazier arrives outside the bank and makes contact with Sergeant Collins as they prepare to get to work. In the bank, the robbers herd all the hostages downstairs to where the vault is. One of the robbers, a woman, separates the bank employees from the customers. Dalton announces that they're going to be collecting everyone's cell phones and keys. He then has the female robber, who he calls Stevie, separate the male and female hostages and order them to undress. Dalton then distributes painters' suits with few masks and dark shades, ordering everyone to put them on. Now the hostages and robbers are all indistinguishable from one another. Meanwhile, Frazier and Mitchell meet the SA Captain John Darius. He announces he and Mitchell will wait for a call from Darius at the nearest diner once a briefing about the current situation is ready. Inside the bank, one of the hostages is coughing and wheezing uncontrollably. Grabbing him, Dalton ushers him to the door and pushes him outside. Unable to immediately determine if he's a robber or a hostage, the police handcuff him and lead him away. At this point, the movie begins to shift between the main storyline. It skips to the time when Frazier and Mitchell interview hostages after the robbery has ended. They're trying to pick out the perpetrators from the rest of the hostages. At present, Dalton and his accomplices walk past the vault, the safe deposit boxes, and into a storeroom where various stationery and other office equipment are. At an office elsewhere in Manhattan, a high-power fixer, Madeline White, is interviewing a nephew of Osama bin Laden who is purchasing property. In the city, the interview is interrupted by White's assistant, who tells her that Arthur Case is on the phone. White takes the call, and Case, knowing White's profession, explains that he has a small problem requiring a person with special skills and complete discretion. She assures him she is more than capable of doing such a job. The movie jumps to the aftermath of the robbery. Frazier and Mitchell interview a young man who tells the detectives that the perps called each other a variation of Steven, Steve, Stevo, and Stevie, the female perp. Back at present, White and Case are walking along the riverfront discussing what Case needs. He has precious family heirlooms inside his safety deposit box at the Manhattan Bank branch that is being held up. Inside a mobile command center just outside the bank, the detectives learned that Dalton had knocked out the bank cameras using infrared light. This makes it hard for them to examine the robbery. Next, the perps release another hostage from the bank. His hands are tied behind him and a case is placed around his chest. Once released, the hostage says he's Vikram Vualwa and that he is a bank employee. Elsewhere in Manhattan, White pays a visit to the mayor and tells him that she's going down to the hostage situation. She needs him to make sure that she's afforded every courtesy by the people in charge. White clearly has enough influence to get the mayor to do what she asks, though it's not revealed what sort. Next, Fraser opens the case that was hung around Vikram's neck. It is empty, though there's a demand in writing from the robbers. They want 2 buses and a fully fueled and manned plane. If their demands aren't met, a hostage will be executed in front of TV cameras every hour. However, Fraser says the perps won't even get a cup of coffee until he talks to them. Meanwhile, Dalton steps outside and hands one of the officers a piece of paper which instructs the cops to deliver enough food to feed all the hostages. In the command center, an officer suggests they send in pizzas, as the pizza boxes can conceal hidden transmitters, allowing them to pick up more conversations from the hostages. Inside the bank, Peltz, one of the hostages, finally gets frustrated and pulls off his mask, arguing with his fellow hostages over his losing control. Unfortunately, Dalton storms in, grabs him by his ankle, drags him to the storeroom, and punches him out. Next, pizzas with hidden transmitters are delivered to Dalton. Inside the bank, Stevie hands Steve her gun, removes her gloves and shades, and puts on an eye mask like those the hostages are being made to wear. She then begins acting as though she's crying hysterically in a loud voice for the hostages to hear. Her plan is to make herself appear as one of the hostages. Steve roughly ushers her into a room and makes her sit down. He then grabs another female hostage about the same height as Stevie, who he treats rudely. After this, he takes her into another room while making sure all the hostages have their masks on and are keeping their hands on the ground. In the following scene, Stevie is seen working in the storeroom, but she looks much like the female hostage from earlier in the mobile command center. The officers are going over the recording made through the bugged pizza boxes. However, they soon realize that the robbers are outplaying them when they discover that the audio in a foreign language played over the transmitters is that of Enver Hoxha, the former president of Albania, who has been deceased for 20 years. Back in the bank, Stevie and Dalton go into the bank's safety deposit box room. They carefully unlock a box and retrieve an envelope that has Arthur Case's name on it and contains a number of legal documents. Underneath the envelope rests a large number of black velvet pouches and a red jewelry box. Meanwhile, White arrives with the mayor and summons Fraser for a meeting. She wants to make contact with the robbers inside. Fraser is skeptical about the idea, but he eventually agrees. Next, he finally makes contact with Dalton over the phone. The robbery leader takes command, warning Fraser that the many innocent lives at stake force him to fulfill Dalton's previous demands. The movie fast forwards to another after the robbery scene. Fraser and Mitchell are interviewing another hostage, but the hostage is clearly Steve, although the detectives don't know that. Steve has given his name as Kenneth Demergian. Inside one of the rooms in the bank, a number of hostages are passing time in conversation. One of them, a man named Hayam, mentions that he's a professor of criminal law at Columbia teaching courses on genocide, slave labor and war reparation. He's also a former attorney. Next, Fraser meets with White outside the command center and contacts Dalton inside the bank so that White can talk to him directly. White tells Dalton that if she's allowed to make sure that certain interests are protected, she can help him get what he came for. After she assures Dalton that she is neither a bank employee nor a police officer, he tells her that she can come into the bank and talk to him face to face. Fraser and 2 officers then escort White to the bank doors. Once inside the bank, White presents her offer to the robbery leader. If Dalton gives up now, she can make sure he'll get no more than the minimum prison sentence, and when it's completed he'll have $2 million waiting for him to pick up from a safe place. Dalton surprisingly turns it down. He then asks White to tell him about the interests she's trying to protect. He then tells her a story about an American man who worked as a clerk for a Swiss bank during World War II. He used his position with the Nazis to enrich himself while people all around him were being stripped at gunpoint of everything they owned, and then used his blood money to open a bank in New York. In fact, the man Dalton is describing his case. Dalton then shows her the legal documentation he's taken from the box that she was after, saying it now belongs to him. Dalton is keeping them as leverage if he is ever captured and put on trial for the robbery. White and her employer Case will have to use all their resources to get him off the hook. Back outside the bank, Frazier debriefs White on the conversation with Dalton. White believes Dalton will not kill anyone, but Frazier is unconvinced. In the following scene, more post-robbery interrogations follow. It is revealed that Peltz, the hostage who pulled off his mask and was punched out by Dalton, is Stavo, showing that all three Stevens acted up at some point while posing as hostages. All part of the act so all three Stevens would appear as fellow hostages. Frazier and Mitchell are also seen interviewing Stevie, but Stevie does not break and the detectives cannot pick out anything that separates her from the other hostages. At present, Frazier believes that Dalton is actually stalling them. He then calls and bluffs him, saying the demanded plane is ready, but Frazier needs to come into the bank and ensure the hostages are okay and that none of them have been killed. Dalton agrees. Next, Frazier is led into the bank and Dalton leads him through a series of connecting offices where the hostages sit masked and clothed the same as Dalton and the other robbers. Once near the exit door, Frazier offers Dalton a handshake, which turns out to be a ploy to get Dalton to drop his guard just long enough for Frazier to grab him and wrestle him to the ground. Unfortunately, Stavo is there with his rifle jammed into Frazier's back. They push him out of the bank, where he's met by Mitchell. Frazier enters the command center and briefs Darius, but just then Dalton and his men kill a hostage as Frazier and the other agents look on through the footage, shaken to the core. Next, Colin and Darius study blueprints of the bank with other cops preparing to storm the bank and end the situation. They decide to use rubber bullets to avoid hostage casualties, but the following morning Frazier is smart enough to realize that the metal case sent out with Vikram was bugged with a transmission device. Dalton had bugged them first, as he knows about the planned storming of the bank, which has been in planning for many hours. Grabbing a microphone, Frazier frantically warns Darius about the transmitter, but Darius refuses to stand down. He says he's going to storm the bank now. Inside the bank, Dalton alerts the three Stevens. They lay smoke grenades as all the hostages are taken into the hallway. The police are about to begin their siege on the bank when suddenly the door is blown open with a small explosive. A few at a time, people in painter outfits begin running out, pleading for the police not to shoot. Despite this, some officers open fire using rubber bullets until Captain Darius orders them to hold. All the people are herded together and made to lie down on the ground. They are put in cuffs and masks are removed. Next, the SO officers and detectives lead the way into the bank, sweeping the place room by room. Immediately they begin finding evidence that, just as Frazier had deduced, this was no ordinary robbery. No bank money has been robbed. The rifles left behind by the three Stevens so they could run out with the hostages and be indistinguishable from them are not real. They are toys. In the woman's bathroom they find the white sack used to cover the head of the murdered hostage with a hidden injector tube of red dye, proof that the earlier hostage execution was staged and nobody was actually harmed. Meanwhile, all the hostages are taken to the station for questioning. Officers take each hostage's name and photograph them before putting them on the buses. Stevie gives her real name as Valerie Keepsake and the Hasidic attorney Professor Hostage gives his name as Chain. A while later, Frazier and Colin meet in a conference room and the former gives the grim details of how thoroughly and flawlessly planned the whole affair was. Each hostage was shown photographs and questioned about anyone who stood out in any way, but every single hostage has at least a few people who would rule them out as suspicious. Colin tells Frazier to bury the case. As Frazier gets up to leave, Colin gives him an afterthought. The missing money Frazier was accused of embezzling has been found. He's off the hook. Frazier is pretty surprised and not entirely in a pleasant manner. Once back at his office, Frazier discovers that a safety box 392 is not in the recorded lists. It's the same box from where Dalton and his crew retrieved Case's documents. Grabbing his jacket, he tells Mitchell to come with him. Frazier then goes to the courthouse and finds Madeline White waiting for him. She confronts him on being told to bury the case, reminding him of their arrangement. The arrangement turns out to be promoting Frazier to an upper detective grade if he accepts to bury the case. But Frazier shows his trump card. A simple writing pen that contained a hidden recording device. Frazier replays a recording when he was in the SUV with White and the mayor. He had the pen in his suit coat pocket. The recording has captured the mayor ordering Frazier to give White everything she needed in the robbery or his career was finished, whether he was guilty of the drug money embezzlement or not. Frazier tries to press White about Arthur Case. He knows that Case is hiding something. White asks again for Frazier to leave everything be, but he leaves without answering her. In the next scene, White brazenly marches into an exclusive men's club to confront Case on the fact that the robbers were after more than just the documents hidden in Case's safety box that contain the evidence of his crimes. She knows that he must have had true precious valuables, and there's only one thing they could be: what the Nazis used to pay Case diamonds. And as Case adds, there was a Cartier ring of incalculable worth that belonged to a wealthy Parisian Jewish banker and his family. Case could have easily saved their lives, but the Nazis gave him the ring to sell them out. Case then writes White a check as payment for her services before she takes off. The movie is back to Dalton repeating his opening monologue. He's in his cell holding one of the black velvet pouches, looking at the diamonds inside it. He gathers a few belongings he has in his cell, turning out two small lights. He pushes out a wall in his cell and it's revealed that he was never in prison but in hiding behind a false wall he and his associates had built in the bank supply room with enough provisions to wait it out until all the news over the robbery had simmered down. He then carefully makes his way out into the public area of the bank. Across the street, Kenneth, Valerie and Darius are waiting in an SUV. We also see Chaim sitting with them. It turns out that he was part of the job all along too, the mastermind behind it. They see Frazier and Mitchell going into the bank and hurriedly call Dalton on his cell phone to warn him, but Dalton is unafraid. He even goes so far as to accidentally bump into Frazier as he and Mitchell enter the bank. He then unnoticeably walks out of the bank and into the waiting van, where he's greeted with a kiss from Valerie and handshakes from Kenneth, Darius and Chaim. When Chaim notes that Dalton doesn't have the ring with him, Dalton says he left it in the safety deposit box but assures Chaim it's in very good hands. Inside the bank, Frazier and Mitchell inspect the safety deposit box 392. They're surprised and amused to find an unfinished package of juicy fruit gum, but they also find a jewelry box containing an exquisite gold and diamond ring. There's also a small piece of scrap paper with the words "Follow the ring" scribbled on it. Next, the detectives go to see Case at his office. Frazier reveals what he's found during the investigation to show that he knows that Case hired Madeline White to keep Frazier reined in, and that Case himself is guilty of some serious crimes. He shows Case the ring, warning him that he's going to follow it. Frazier then goes to an exclusive diner where the mayor is having lunch with Madeline White. He gives White the pen with the incriminating recording he'd used as leverage against her. Frazier arrives home in the evening, where he's greeted by Sylvia as he stores away his gun and shield and his acknowledgement plaque for his promotion to first grade. He realizes there's a small object in his suit coat pocket. Reaching inside, he's stunned to find a small but beautifully cut diamond. He smiles to himself in amusement as he realizes that Dalton was the man who bumped into him at the bank entrance. Moreover, as a sign of respect, he slipped the diamond to Frazier so that the detective could now get a proper engagement ring made and propose to Sylvia. That was all of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button and subscribe to watch more videos like this, and don't forget to turn on notifications. Thanks for watching.